Today what we're actually going to be trying to do is make a spool using the Revolute feature. So to start off, you would make a sketch like you normally would. So here's my sketch, I'm creating it, I'm going to select the right plane. With that, I can go ahead and hide the other planes, and I can actually start making my sketch. The way Revolute actually works is that you basically create a profile of the thing you're trying to create, and then this profile will continue to rotate along its axis. With this, you're able to create complex circular shapes that would otherwise be hard to create. So, for example, in this tutorial, we're going to be trying to create a spool. So, to start off, obviously, I think the spool, we need to establish some things about the spool. In this case, I'm going to be making it a dual valley spool, meaning it's able to route two different strings without them interfering. So, let's start off. First, I'm going to go ahead and try making the first valley. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it around, let's say, 32.5 millimeters. And I'm going to make it, let's say, 13.5 millimeters wide. Now I can go ahead and try finishing off the square. Obviously, if I were to try and do it like this, there'd be no actual walls for the spool to spool around, right? For the string, I mean. So what I can do is I'm going to make some other lines down here. So I'm going to make this line 3.25 millimeters. And this time I'm only going to make it 28.5 millimeters. With this, I'm now able to connect to the edge. Now, as you see, we're kind of creating a valley here. So essentially, the other side is going to be a mirror copy of this. So what I can actually do is, by dragging over this line, I'm able to find the center point. So if you look at this, there's going to be a center point between that line. If you notice when I highlighted it, a little midpoint symbol pops up. That means we're right in the center. So if I click there and go to side, you can see they're all equally spaced. So what I can do is, if I press Q, that opens up construction. You can also press it up from up here. And what construction does is that there are lines that show up but don't actually affect the sketch. In other words, these lines won't cause a particular surface to be split into two. So with that, I'm going to make a line down the middle. This is essentially now a symmetry curve. So I can use the mirror tool up here. Click on it. It prompts you to select the mirror line, which is essentially going to be the line of symmetry. In this case, it's this. And now it asks you to select the entities to be mirrored. So I'm going to be selecting this and this. So now if you notice, it's actually symmetrical at this point. Now what I can do is grab a line tool again and connect these two. Now what I can do using these scissors up here, called the trim tool, is select this line segment. And I can actually go and delete it. Now, as you may have noticed, those lines are suddenly turned blue, which isn't a good thing because that means the sketch is no longer constrained. So basically, I can grab any line and drag it along, and that can begin to cause issues. So what I would do actually in that case is I'm going to undo and put that line back. And I'm actually going to make it a construction line like I showed. Oh, sorry, my bad. That was the mirror tool. Once I click on it and make it a construction line, you notice how that area is no longer grayed out, meaning it's no longer a surface that can actually be extruded and so on. So now since we said this was going to be a two-valley spool, we still have to make the other side. So once again, we can use the mirror utility, click on it. And in this case, the mirror line is actually going to be this. And this time we're going to be selecting just about every line. So we'll click on this, 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 and so on. So at this point, you can see how it's already mirrored. So the cool thing about mirroring and why it's such a useful tool is that, for example, if I were to do something like this and change this dimension to, let's say, 5 millimeters, you can see how the sketch automatically adjusts itself. I'm going to switch it back. There's many other ways to start tweaking around with it. So let's say, for example, I actually want the spool to be wider. I can change this to 15. You see how that changes it. I'm going to leave it as it is for now. Now, if you notice, this would have sharp edges here in the corner, and those can be kind of hard to print. So what I can actually do in that case is grab the fillet tool right here and select these two lines. What that does is it creates a circle between them to make the curve less of an actual pointy angle and more of a curve. If you see right now, it's a radius of 5. However, as you can tell, that's obviously too big, hence why the line is red. So if I move it, you start seeing how it actually starts turning blue, and you can kind of start seeing the effect it will do. For now, I'm going to make it a 0.5 millimeter fillet. Now, you see how this line is curved and not pointy like the rest. Now I'm going to keep on doing that and repeat. For this line, since it's actually two lines, you would actually do a radius of 1 millimeter. And now these two should be at the same height. This one, we can go back to using 0.5 millimeters. Oops, sorry about that. So there's that radius of 0.5 millimeters. With that, we're done with our sketch and we're ready to start revoluting the sketch. So you can actually click on this tool called Revolve right here. Click on it and select the surface you would like to revolve. In this case, we're going to be revolving all surfaces. Now, if you notice, it's prompting you for a revolve axis. That's basically where the line is going to be spinning along. So since we want it to spin in this direction, we have to find the mate that successfully does that. So right there should do it. Yes. So at that point, you see how it's doing a rotation basically of the sketch and spinning it around to create that sketch all the way throughout. It's almost like a side profile of the spool. You can also do something called where you only revolute it a certain amount. So I can only do a certain angle. I could do maybe 180 degrees and so on. For now, I'm going to do a full mate. A full revolute. Now with that, it's starting to look more like a spool, but we still have a couple of issues. For starters, we don't have anywhere to mount the string to, and we actually don't have anywhere to mount the actual go build the hub to. So an easy way to solve this is using one of these new surfaces we have created. We can make a sketch there. So I'm going to make it right here. With that, I'd recommend finding the center point, which is actually pointed out here. And what I'm actually going to do is go make a line all the way to here. Now I'm going to make it a construction line. If you notice, I'm not going to put any dimensions on it. Then I'm going to make another line that goes to the edge right there. It's also going to be a construction line, but this one is actually going to have dimensions on it. You can do so by clicking on here, selecting it, selecting whatever dimension you want. In this case, I'm going to select 1.45 millimeters. Now, if you notice, when I did that, it shifted the other line that wasn't constrained. You see? And moved this point along. So now from this point, I'm actually going to go ahead and try creating the actual holes for the string to attach to. So I'm going to bring this out, let's say 2 millimeters, and create a small hole there of around, let's say 2 millimeters as well. With that, I'm actually going to go ahead and mirror the other side. So this is going to be the mirror line. There's going to be the entities we're mirroring. At that point, that side is done. What we can actually go ahead and do is add some mounting holes to the other side. So I'm going to choose a line through here, right in the center, and just make it perpendicular to the other. This is our mirror line. So I select it, and then I'm selecting these entities to be mirrored. At this point, we have mounting holes on both sides. So now the only thing we're missing is to actually add some mounting holes for the hub. So what I like to do for those is I like to go on the vendor's page, in this case Gobilda, and I try to look for it. So here they are, hubs. I'm going to be using a Sonic hub. I want it to have threads, and let's say I want the board to be 8 millimeters Rex. I click on it, and if you see this sketch right here, this is actually a drawing, a technical drawing, which includes all the dimensions you will need. So for example, if you see, the holes are spaced 16 millimeters from each other in a square. So what I can do at that point is make a center square, which has dimensions of 16 by 16 millimeters, and that should be able to achieve my spacing. Now, I'm actually going to want to have the hub tucked in. So if you notice, the hub is 32 millimeters. So just to account for clearances, I'm going to make it around 32.5 millimeters. So here we are back in the spool tutorial. Yep, right there. And I'm going to make that square I was talking about. If you go up here, you're able to change the way rectangles are made. I'm going to change it to a center rectangle. So like I said, this is 16 by 16 millimeters. But first I'm going to make it a construction line, since this isn't actually going to be used for extruding. So I click on construction, which should be up here. Select the square and go ahead and draw it. Once I draw it out, I can type in my dimensions. So 16 by 16 millimeters. At that point, I should be able to step my circle. So I'm going to make one here, one here, one here, and one here. Now, if you notice, they're all completely different sizes. So what I like to do is set them all equal to each other. And now they should all be the same size. So what I can do at that point is change the dimensions of one of them. So in this case, since these are 4 millimeter screws, you always want to account for tolerances for small holes. I'm going to make them 4.7 millimeters, which I found works great with 3D printed plastic. At that point, there's the actual holes made. Now, since, like I said, I actually want to tuck in the hub a little bit. So I'm actually going to make a 32.5 millimeter bore around the outside. So at that point, I should be ready to move on to the next step, and that is actually extruding. So I'm going to extrude these holes all the way through, click on remove, and I can click on through all. This at this point goes through the whole part and removes the material, so the screws can actually fit through there. Now, like I said, I was actually going to be tucking in the hub. So let's go ahead and tuck it in by selecting the sketch, selecting this circle, and actually clicking on remove material. At this point, it's kind of nice to switch to a side view because you can see just how much you're removing. So 14 millimeters sounds good. At that point, I can remove it, and there it is. Now you're ready to move on to the next video. Oh, actually, one quick thing. I forgot to remove these holes, which would be something similar, where you just click on remove, and you can actually click through all. And there it is. There's your finished part.